Well, remember what I said at the very beginning. Imagine the level of chaos that you would create in the world around you if you had to tell the truth every single time in every circumstance you encountered for just one day. Well, we saw an unraveling of that in this movie. And from that, I think there's a number of lessons that we can learn about lying and why they are so problematic. And here's the first one. Lying is a bigger problem than we generally recognize or face honestly. This is one of the things I thought was brilliant about the movie is they took all the basic circumstances of life and how many times in casual conversation we lie and lie and lie and lie and lie, and we have no idea of the chaos that we're creating in the future because when you lie, you're trying to change reality. That's the purpose of a lie. It's to deny reality and live in a false world. And that never works when the real world and the hard, rough facts of real life comes in. And it becomes a mess. And so Jesus talked about this. He said, and the reason he talked about it is because there is an evil spirit behind it. That what God designs has order and beauty. And anytime you try to deviate from the order and beauty, that's a lie. That's a falsehood. That's a false narrative, and it's very destructive. And the reason that those narratives come about is because there is an arch enemy of God. His name is Satan. Listen to Jesus' comments on the source of lying in our world. He says, "For you are the children of your father, the devil." He's dealing with a bunch of religious liars, frankly, people who are constantly twisting the truth, nuancing the truth. They're like, well, lawyers, going to simple, twisting definitions and things like that. And I'm not saying all lawyers are bad, but these guys were known as the lawyers of their day. They were the lawyers of their day that he's talking to. That's who the scribes were. They were the lawyers of the day. Anyways, he goes, "For you are the children of your father, the devil, and you love to do the evil things he does. He was a murderer from the beginning," the devil was, "and he has always hated the truth." So that brazen serpentine beast in the garden, the Nakash, was always a murderer in his heart. What is a murderer? One who wants to destroy the beauty of life and its flourishing. And secondly, he was always a liar. He hated the truth. He didn't just not use it. He despised the truth. Why? Because the truth forces you to face the reality of your own moral corruption. And he didn't like that. And so he continues. Because there is no truth in him. In other words, the words of truth can only come from a pure heart. And the more one lies, it is the greater revelation of the contamination and the evil of the heart of the person who's speaking. And so Jesus continues. When he lies, when the devil lies, it is consistent with his character, for he is a liar and this is terrifying, the father of lies. In other words, every time that you and I tell a lie, it's because it has been insinuated into our mind and we bought into it, and that insinuation was the sperm of the evil one. We are acting consistent as though we were spawns of the devil when we intentionally tell lies. That's what Jesus is saying. And he's telling the people in front of him that truth. And it didn't go well, as we find out. He ends up crucified for telling that truth. But that was just one of the many things that they did because they were what? Murderers also. Because you find that behind the denial of truth, in other words, the unwillingness to face reality, when that manifests itself in personal relationships, it becomes hatred. And hatred is resolved through murder. Because what you're really saying is, I don't want to have to experience you. That's what hatred is. I don't want anything to do with you. It's like, well, I don't wish them bad. No, you don't. You want to sever the relationship. And the only way you can permanently sever any relationship is by killing the other person. And now you get what you want. You have a total destruction of their life. Your lie has now been realized. That's why lying and murder go hand in hand. And Jesus always shows how those two things are two sides of the same coin. And you find them in the same author of them all. His name is Satan. And so when we are Christians and we think we're telling little white lies, we're actually participating in the kingdom of darkness. And our participation in that is corrupting not only our own soul, it's doing damage to God's kingdom, and it is distorting the world in some small way with a butterfly effect that will have rippling effects in the future that we have no comprehension of. The only way that we can face life in safety is by rigorously telling the truth and refusing to lie. And so the point here that I'm trying to make from this particular verse is this, that we lie so often and so reflexively that it is difficult to go through an entire day without compromising the truth in some form or fashion. It's really hard work to tell the truth. And I think if you stop and think about it, you realize it actually is. Half the time I have to stop mid-sentence and say, hey, let me readjust what I just said, because that isn't quite what I meant. It's a way that I can at least pull back part of the false narrative that I'm making, even though I wasn't thinking about constructing the false narrative. It's just second nature to lie, because that is in all of us. And the principle then is this: lying is not only evil and it makes you an ally of Satan, but it also creates unresolvable conflicts in your practical daily living. Because if you weave a new false narrative, that's what a lie is, how are you going to live with that? Because you have to live in reality and you have to live with this lie at the same time. You can't. It's impossible. It's impossible. Eventually the two worlds collide and the truth always wins out. And then you get humiliated and you have layer upon layer of problems. It's difficult to tell the truth, and the consequences are catastrophic, even though we only think they're minor. And that's what this movie is really illustrating in a comical way. It is unbelievable how convoluted life gets when you practice lying. The second thing you see is that lies are like chains that bind you in the prison of a false reality, like we mentioned. The whole purpose of a false narrative, of a lie, is to change reality, but it doesn't change reality. It just temporarily buys you time as people are confused and led astray by the lie. But the truth always comes out in the end. As Moses said, be sure and know your sin will find you out. And eventually you're going to get found out. It's much better to turn yourself in than get found out. And so it's only by telling the truth that we will be able to set our soul free and rid ourselves of the anxiety-inducing, stressful complications of living imprisoned by the chains your lives have formed. It's our lies that form the chains that bind us and leave us in this confusion. Now, when you watch this movie, I know that the actor Jim Carrey's kind of a frenetic kind of guy, but his whole life is a ball of stress and complexity and problems. It's a beautiful illustration of how our lives get unbelievably twisted and chaotic when we're involving ourselves in lies. And the more deeply we get involved, the worse it gets. One psychiatrist, I read a book many years ago. His name is Scott Peck. I'm sure you recognize who he is, famous guy. But his opening chapter is upon how we destroy our lives through the lies that we tell. And his whole point is, with each lie, we have to add another layer of lies until we have so many layers of lies, we have this complex web of false reality that we're living in that we can't even sort it out. And so what we end up doing, even unconsciously, is telling new lies that try to fill in the holes that the old lies had created in our view and understanding of reality. And that psychotherapy is the idea of slowly untangling all of these layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of lie in order to live an authentic life, which is the only life, really, that there's worth living. And so what this movie illustrates is a very chaotic craziness of trying to live an honest and genuine life. The solution to lying, then, is to speak the truth. That's why Jesus says in the same chapter of John chapter 8, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. What is the shortcut to ending all the chaos, all the confusion, all the frustration, all the damage done by lies? Simple. Tell the truth. That's it. And how many times we think, well, how am I going to massage this, and how am I going to nuance that, and how am I going to... Well, stop. Just say, I think I'm just going to go tell the truth and deal with it, because then it's finally dead. We finally killed this monster. And what we do when we tell the truth, we give the devil a black eye. That's exactly what we're doing. We are punishing the evil one who was the one who spawned the lie in the first place. And then you agree to go along with it, and now you have this problem. The way you stop it is by telling the truth. If you don't know what to say, or don't know what to do, or don't want to reveal the truth, start here. Just stop lying. Say, I'm not telling any more lies. Then as you grow a little stronger in that, start telling the truth. The sooner you get into speaking the truth, the sooner you'll have a healthy, uncomplicated, simplified life. In the meantime, if so, I'm not sure I can face that, take the next step. Just stop adding to the lies. Just stop it. Just zip your lip. Don't say anything. Just say nothing. And that's at least a step forward. Third thing is speaking the truth in love is the perfect balance of honesty and mercy, but it's incredibly difficult to pull off. In other words, the ideal kind of life is not just, I'm just going to be a truth teller. You hear people say, I'm just a truth teller. You look fat and ugly today. That's my truth. Well, that's beautiful, except for that's not very helpful, because that's the truth without love. And that doesn't help anybody. And love without the truth also doesn't help anybody. You say, oh, you look fine. And they're an embarrassment to themselves, and everyone's snickering behind their back as they walk by. That doesn't help either. You want to have this balance of truth and love. That's why the Bible says one of the virtues, one of the things that should characterize a Christian's life in Ephesians 4:15 is this. Instead of living like the world does, it says, we will speak the truth in love. Instead of doing what everybody else does, as a Christian community, we're going to be different. And one of the things that's going to characterize our difference is we always tell the truth in love, in the context of love. And when those two are melded together, you now have the capacity for authentic, deep, meaningful, significant relationships. In fact, I would say it this way, especially in marriages, but close friendships, it's the same thing as this. If you want to have more intimacy and have greater depth of connection with somebody, just start telling the truth in love. That's what every soul is craving for. It's just to know the truth and have it delivered in a way that isn't offensive and damaging, but is, even if it's hurtful, it's not damaging, and it's always helpful in the end. Just tell the truth in love. He says, when you do that, what happens? Growing in every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of his body, the church. In other words, for the spiritual growth of the church and the spiritual growth of any individual in the church requires the capacity to tell the truth in a loving way. And that takes hard work. It takes an incredible level of courage to actually speak the truth, especially when the truth is not all that flattering of yourself. And then do it in a way that doesn't punish anybody, doesn't harm anybody, and doesn't create unnecessary hurt. We want to do it in a way that when we're done saying it, we are like an excellent surgeon. We have gotten rid of the cancer, and we have exposed the whole sore to the light where healing can begin to take place. That is speaking the truth in love. That is the virtue that God wants us as Christians to practice. Quit, and here's what I would say, quit lying to yourself by dismissing the lies that you tell as though they weren't important. And you have the classic line all the time. You hear guys saying, your wife will say, does this look good on me? Does it make my behind look big? Oh, I know what to say. Well, no, you don't need to comment, number one. Or number two, you could say, well, I think a different dress would be more flattering. That's also the truth. That's speaking the truth in love. But to just pretend, oh, it's perfectly fine, and then snicker behind her back, that's not very helpful either. You want to speak the truth in love. It'll help you to grow. You'll have to become more introspective. You'll have to be more thoughtful about the words that come out of your mouth. And yet you'll also find yourself speaking with great courage and strength so that your words are taken seriously because people know you as a person that tells the truth. And they do it, and you're a person that does it in a loving way. It's a beautiful reflection of the character of Christ. That's why it says that in every way we become more and more like Christ. How? When I speak the truth in love. And so here's a homework that I take away from this movie. It's pretty straightforward. You can guess what it is. Begin the habit of no more lies, and add to that, start telling the truth. Those are your basic homework. So here's what I've written out. This is sort of a diagnostic that you can give yourself. Start telling the truth for one whole day and see how it turns out. If it's chaotic and drastically different than your normal day, you have a problem. You are living more in the false reality of your lies than in the real reality of the truth. And that's why you have so many complications today. You've got so many webs of lies that you can't live a normal life without continuing to perpetuate them. Then you want to address those. And here's how you address them. Find the easiest lie to undo and hit that one first. And as you get better and better, then the next easiest as you go up the lane until you have the great reveal. And the great reveal is probably going to be something's pretty big, and you're not going to be ready to do that day one. That's why you have to work yourself up from the least damaging lie to the one that you've really been holding most closely to. And here's the good news. Once you get that lie out and on the table, in the context of a loving person who also speaks the truth and in love and has got the maturity to handle it, you'll find your shame begins to die. And you can live strong, courageous, life of authentic love and goodness. And it won't happen till that lie gets out of you. And that's the power of defeating the devil himself, is when you start becoming a truth teller, and who does it with great love. If you're a truth-telling person, then your life will become a much better blessing to everyone around you. And you'll do more damage to the kingdom of darkness than anything else you could possibly do. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again next time.